Claire, I'm going to start with you. The Daily Telegraph, it's your front page tomorrow, this mega firestorm. There are two front pages actually. There's the wrap, which people will get when they pick up the paper tomorrow, and that says Save Our State. It's got a photograph of Gladys Berejiklian, and there it is, and it says PM's help vow in horror fire crisis. Scott Morrison has pledged help for New South Wales in its fire crisis, as Gladys Berejiklian says the state is living in fear. Having just been in that state, I would absolutely agree with that. That's the wrap. Then the front page tomorrow, inside the wrap, says mega fire storm, Claire, and this is the story. This is the moment, and they've got an extraordinary photograph. Some of the images coming out tomorrow are extraordinary. This is the moment one of the 7 massive emergency level infernos tearing across the state unleashed hell on struggling fireys on a blazing front line. They've got images of the fireball at Orangeville in the city's southwest that were released just hours before those 3 blazes merged in the northwest to form a mega fire spanning an area larger than Sydney. Claire, it's just extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was in Sydney myself earlier this week, and you might have seen a bit around they're calculating how bad the air quality is by how many cigarettes it's the equivalent of smoking.
Yeah.
And there was a point there where it was so bad that it was to just walk around outside and be breathing in the air, you might as well have been smoking a pack of cigarettes in the day, which just speaks to not only how ferocious and intense these fires are and the smoke plumes that they're creating, but just how close they are to Sydney, which is obviously a massive city with a lot of people who are being impacted, even though they're not necessarily on the fire front. And the next few days are just going to be absolutely critical for both those smaller communities in the way of the fire and all of New South Wales that's being impacted as the sort of after effects with the smoke and other conditions.
Yeah, Claire, you're right to point that out. The Daily Telegraph did do the sort of SIGI index, Terry, and when you're in Sydney, and I don't want to take away from the people who are out and are facing these fire fronts, people who are fleeing for their lives, the loss of property is terrible, the firefighters are incredible, but what you do notice, and I was on the air with John Stanley and we were saying you would advise people not to fly into Sydney at the moment, and you know, as a Sydney sider, there you are, you can see this mega firestorm. You wouldn't normally say that, but Claire is right to point out that SIGI index, and they're saying pregnant women should be very, very careful because we don't know what is in the smoke, what you're inhaling, what goes into your lungs and what therefore goes into your bloodstream. But that front page tomorrow, Terry, that shows when these fires all join together to form this mega firestorm, it's just incredible, isn't it?
Well, it's a shocker, isn't it, Jane? And this is basically still early in the season. And we don't want to argue about the causes of it. I think we deal with problems that we have, and certainly air quality in many ways is not the biggest problem. It's actually what is happening on the ground. It's the homes that are being lost. It's the livestock that have been burned alive. It's the families who are, you know, whether they lose their houses or not, are evacuated and need to cope with the trauma of that. And of course, the fireys on the front line doing a magnificent job trying to contain it. And you know, basically ordinary men and women essentially up against it and rising to the challenge. And I think everybody around the country, everybody, even down here in Victoria, our hearts are with, and our prayers are with the people of New South Wales. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I'll show you the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. We'll go back to the Telegraph later, the story of the Treasurer and the tax cuts, but we're just going to stick with the fires. They are front and centre tonight, and I'll show you the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. And again, this a photograph of this blaze. And there were stories around today, Claire, in your paper, of firefighters who'd managed to save another firey's house. There are stories of incredible bravery. Terry's right to point out the loss of livestock. I think many of us who are animal lovers felt devastated about the 2/3 of that koala population near Port Macquarie being wiped out a couple of weeks ago. Well, the loss of animal life is going to be terrible. We've already seen a loss of human life and we've seen firefighters injured. Sydney Morning Herald tomorrow says we're at breaking point. The Rural Fire Service founder Phil Koperberg believes the state's firefighters are stretched to the limit, Claire, warning the worst is still to come.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing about this. It's as has been mentioned, this is early in the season, and we've had week after week of these really devastating fires impacting not just homes and obviously taking lives, but as well devastating the local the animal, not just livestock, but the native animals as well. And we've seen some incredible stories of things like dogs that are specially trained to detect injured koalas so that the animal welfare people can go in and rescue them. There's been some amazing efforts to try and protect and save what can be saved, but there's still, this early on, you'd have to expect that the worst is yet to come.